Mr. Mayor and council members. By now, you normally would have received notification about tomorrow evening's Brisbane Baylands Community Advisory Group meeting, which did not appear to have been received in mail yet. So I wanted to let the council know, as well as other members of the public, that the meeting tomorrow evening from 7 to 9 p.m. in this location is going to have a presentation by Alec Noggle of the Water Board for a remedial action plan for the Kinder Morgan site. And Randy Burrow's not here, but he had called it remediation light, meaning I think we need to talk a little bit about a better work coming out of this, but this does start the comment period right around now, so we will have approximately 30 days from this period to review the information and make comments. So I thank you for the opportunity to let people know. Thank you.
Ken McIntyre. Can I just please ask a question of staff? Are we going to have our environmental attorney look at that?
I'll have to confer with staff. I don't know.
Okay.
Honorable Mayor, Councilman, if I can talk.
Your name, please, for the record.
Ken McIntyre, county resident, representing San Bruno Mountain Watch. If I can make a comment during this staff report on the Northeast Ridge, I'll wait till then.
Fine. David Schooley, you want to speak now or wait? Michelle Salmon, same question.
Michelle Salmon, Sierra Point Road, Brisbane. I want to pass these out to you first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been doing a lot of reading lately, and part of what I've been reading is the 1989 addendum to the Environmental Impact Review, as well as the Northeast Ridge Development Project as approved by the City Council on November 6, 1989. And in doing a lot of the research that's been going on over what we're going to speak about in a little while, I came across something that was very disturbing, and that's about the archaeological sensitivity of the area that's being developed. And in the 1989 EIR, which I gave you a copy of the page that I'm looking at, and that's was approved by the City Council on 6/16/1989 and accepted for the development of the Northeast Ridge. It says, in particular, the proximity of this site and the generally high archaeological sensitivity of the eastern San Francisco Peninsula shoreline indicates that an archaeological reconnaissance of the Northeast Ridge development should be conducted. It goes on to sort of describe a little bit of what they did. In the Guadalupe Valley area, the evidence of prehistoric archaeological nature would include such attributes as locally darkened soil, referred to as midden, that had formed as the result of long-term human habitation, marine shell fragments, etc. It goes on to describe it. And then it goes on to describe the field reconnaissance, and evidence of an archaeological nature similar to those described above were conveyed to the personnel conducting the trenching operations. If materials meeting this description were encountered, an archaeologist was to be contacted. And it goes on to talk about mitigation measures. In particular, however, if during future development any buried deposits of an archaeological nature, such as those described earlier in this report, are encountered, work in the immediate vicinity should halt and an archaeologist contacted to evaluate the finds. Other than this, no special recommendations are made. And in the Northeast Ridge Development Project approved by the City Council, it clearly states, prior to the issuance of a grading permit, the applicant shall provide written evidence to the planning director that a qualified archaeologist has been notified and retained to be on site as required by the planning director during the grading and other significant ground-disturbing activities. If cultural or scientific features are discovered, work shall be stopped, and the archaeologist shall report such findings to the project developer and the planning director. It goes on to describe that. The grading that took place this summer, I feel, has a possibility that it graded an archaeological site showing Midden. The first picture that I gave you was taken on July 7th, 2007, when Robin Leiter took us on a tour of the proposed development site. The next picture that you have from the 10th of September shows the grading that was done under a emergency safety request by the city to Fish and Wildlife. The next picture shows an area right there next to that bulldozer of extremely darkened soil that very well could have been Midden. The next picture shows the location from a little bit further away so that you can see the placement of it. And the last picture shows the next day on 9/11, it was gone, graded. So I'd like to see the archaeologist report. I'd like to know which archaeologist was on site, or did we bury our children's future forever under a ton of dirt without following the laws that we ourselves made? I do not think that the planning director and the developer is above the laws that we made in this city and that we all agreed to. I mean, now we'll never know if that darkened spot of soil, clearly very dark, very different than any of the other soil in this graded area, and this was freshly graded area. This wasn't new graded area. This was pristine, brand new land as shown on the original picture from 7/7. So I'd like to see the archaeologist report. I'd like to see that there was an archaeologist on site, or else I think we did something very wrong here without having an archaeologist look at this when this is prime archaeological area as specified in the environmental impact review addendum in 1989. And this is just one of the many egregious things that have happened on the ridge with the grading. And this is not about butterflies. This is about the entire habitat. This is about the possible loss of an ancient burial site. Who knows? Maybe it was just a pile of, cow dung from when we had a dairy farm there. But the fact of the matter is, in this picture, it clearly shows that it is extremely darkened soil in an otherwise pale landscape of dirt that was being excavated. Was there an archaeologist on site, Mr. Prince? You're the planning director.
You're not asking questions, you're making
Mayor,
a presentation.
I would really like to know whether there was an archaeologist on site as required by the laws that we wrote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it. Any further requests for oral communications? Okay, we'll move on to approving the monthly investment report.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item is the consent calendar. We have one item to approve request for co-sponsorship of the Mothers of Brisbane clothing swap.
I'll give you a motion on that one. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, now, since we changed the agenda, it's the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last meeting, there were two items that came up with regards to the Northeast Ridge that we put into a staff report, giving you the status and an update on those. Briefly, the first one had to do with a house remodel at 10 Huckleberry Court. On September 11th of 2007, the Community Development Director, sitting as a zoning administrator, heard a request to add 195 square feet of living space and replace the existing 205 square foot deck with a new 156 square foot deck that would extend 10.5 feet from the house into the rear yard. According to the Brisbane Municipal Code, Section 17.42.070.a.1, the zoning administrator may be allowed to approve minor modifications like this one. The ordinance appointing the planning director as zoning administrator was initially adopted by the first city council in 1961 and was later updated in 1984. In addition to the authority granted by the Brisbane Municipal Code, the Northeast Ridge project vesting tentative map conditions of approval, planning and building general subsection J provides the planning director the same authority of approving minor modifications. There is nothing located in the conditions of approval which disapproves these types of modifications. In fact, subsection J anticipates these types of changes would be made in the future, similar to remodels that happen in the lower section of the city. The difference with the modifications made to houses on the Northeast Ridge is they need to be approved by the homeowners association first, which was done in this case. The staff report that was provided to the zoning administrator is attached. Perhaps we could just do these one issue at a time. If there's any questions on that, either myself, Community Development Director, or the City Attorney could respond.
Any questions on the deck change? Go on to part two.
Okay. Part two had to do with the grading permit. The grading permit for the lots were issued on June 25th, 2007 with an anticipated start date of July 9th, 2007 and an end date of October 11th, 2007. This was done to ensure the safety of the area by making sure all grading and winterization of the area was completed prior to the start of the rainy season. The grading permit was issued only after the HCP administrator and with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife gave their approval. These 6 lots are adjacent to the 11 lots on Golden Aster Court, which we previously had approved, or City Council previously approved. The Public Works Director is here, and he can go into more detail in terms of the grading permit for the winterization purposes that he does in this case as well as many other cases.
Before we do that, are there any council questions?
No, but I guess I would like to see, I don't think staff's ready to answer that, but Michelle Salmon's question about was there any reports with regards to archaeological findings, or did we have an archaeologist look at it?
Sure, I would be more than happy to prepare a report and bring that back to City Council to your next business meeting.
I'd like to hear from either, Randy, if you got anything to say. I mean, I read the report, it's pretty clear. But I'd like to hear from the public unless you have anything to say.
Anything you want to add, Randy?
No, sir, not at this time. I think we can take public comment. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Mr. McIntyre.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmen, I'm Ken McIntyre again, county resident, representing San Bruno Mountain Watch. I want to summarize the letter that I passed out to you, but I want to say a few words before I do that. I was in a state of denial when I first heard that the grading was taking place on the ridge back in early August. I have so much respect for the environmental ethic that I've seen in Brisbane, from the commitment to saving the Brisbane acres, the support of Earth Day and the lagoon cleanup, native plantings along Quarry Road, the great work of the Open Space and Ecology Committee, that I just couldn't take in the idea that calippe habitat was being destroyed in advance of the incidental take permit being done at the same time that the Planning Commission was considering the EIR addendum as one small step in the process that might lead to habitat destruction and building. So now that I finally realized the extent of the grading that has been done right over calippe habitat, had a conversation with the senior biologist for Fish and Wildlife, and she confirmed that 1¼ acres of habitat was taken. I still have a hard time believing it. I keep thinking somebody just made a mistake, that it wasn't intentional. But from where we stand, it looks like a pretty clear violation of the Endangered Species Act. So now I'd like to just summarize this letter from Brian Gaffney, our attorney. He says that the City of Brisbane granted permission to Brookfield Homes to move the HCP, the Habitat Conservation Plan, fence line by 120 feet, grade over 30,000 square feet, to build sidewalks, drainage, and houses in Court B portion of the Northeast Ridge. Such activities likely resulted in an illegal take of listed Calliope silver spot butterflies. Moving down to the bottom of that page, Brisbane's issuance of grading, construction, and building permits for Court B contradicts Brisbane's earlier stated position on this matter. On November 16, 2000, Ms. Carol Nelson, who was the Planning and Community Development Director, notified the Fish and Wildlife Service that Brisbane, quote, has not and will not, until the city's incidental take permit is amended to cover the Calliope silver spot butterfly, issue any grading or building permits that could affect the species. And it goes on. Then in the letter there, he's citing some evidence that Calliope was taken, but that's pretty well established. Wherever the viola is found, the Fish and Wildlife considers it likely that the butterfly is there as well. Then in the 2003 EIR addendum, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has stated that since the take of Calliope silver spot would occur with development of Unit 2, Neighborhood 2, actual implementation of the project could not proceed until the Section 10A permit and the HCP are amended. Continued construction of roads, streets, and homes will also likely result in further take of the butterflies, since they're vulnerable to injury and mortality from dust. The last paragraph. By letter dated May 26, 1999, San Bruno Mountain Watch notified Brisbane that Brisbane was taking Calliope silver spot butterflies by issuance of permits, licenses, amendments, or approval for any activity on San Bruno Mountain, and of Mountain Watch's intent to sue under the Endangered Species Act for take of Calliope. If Brisbane does not immediately suspend and revoke all permits issued to Brookfield Homes associated with the Court B area, San Bruno Mountain Watch will have to consider its judicial remedies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. David Schooley?
Mayor, council members, David Schooley, 71 to Larry. I was gone this summer for 2 months back east to various universities talking about the HCP and what it meant and what had happened on San Bruno Mountain for all these many years. So I talked to lots of young people and people facing exactly what's happening here on San Bruno Mountain. But as I left, when I first left, I'd gone up there right in the area that's now bulldozed, and I'd seen the Johnny Jump Up silver spot right there, and more than I'd seen. I saw the fence in an odd spot, and took photographs of the area, but just the week before I left. And I came back and came up on the ridge and with a hike and looked down, and that whole area was totally gone. And that's when I was horrified, because I didn't think that was going to happen to this town during this quiet summertime. Anyway, over the last 100 and some years, there have been a number of critical proclamations throughout the United States, proclamations. The emancipation.
David, will you try and speak into the mic?
Sorry, emancipation, the women's suffrage, civil rights, a big set of moves for all of us. And then 50 years ago began another move, and this was a critical change. That was the Rare and Endangered Species Act. It was a legal and a scientific beacon for all species. And not just as a creation of the planet for humans, but for species below. All species on this planet were being looked at concerning what we've done to ourselves. And most of us hadn't been looking that much, and powers and energies were not going in that direction. Of course, now it's global warming facing us, for example. But that was a critical move, that change, not just from us and our troubles as human beings, but for all the planet. And the first thing that got hit by that great vision was private property and corporate finance and political power games. And that turned up rapidly from San Bruno Mountain into something called Habitat Conservation Plan, now called HCP. And the Rare and Endangered Species Act was not just for land use, but for something far more critical, our creation. And the Habitat Conservation Plan turned itself into a possibility to kill. It sounds good, looks good for all levels at that point when it was done, but it has a basic, simple reason. And private property has greed and desire, can go ahead and kill, allowing to kill. Can we do that for human beings? For any of the great efforts we did on this planet up to this point? That wasn't a legal agreement. That is a legal agreement to kill. The endangered land should have been purchased. It should have been protected immediately in any chance and before any chance that anything could do. But here it went ahead with this big game that now has affected the whole United States, allowing to kill. It's an allowing, ongoing thing. And now we're facing it by this great farcical move, because the HCP's biggest out front stand was rare and endangered species, private property. Well, we can kill it because we're going to attempt to recreate that habitat elsewhere. This is 30 years. It has not recreated that habitat anywhere. It's reduced and never really marked the amount of destruction that's happened. It's never carefully marked down as it should have done if it was going to do it at all, but it didn't. It's simply quietly destroyed. Quietly, people think we're doing a good effort to recreate something we don't know how to recreate. And so here we are now facing, after these 30 years, it seems that unfortunately the county, the state, the city, rare and endangered species, allowing to go ahead and kill without a legal, proper scientific move, now being able to play games. And this was just frightening for me to see that this is just letting it go through. And I certainly hope that everybody else here in the room, in the city, in the county, and anybody facing this move will really understand that this is the moment to change it, to look back at it. And there are other legal efforts now beginning in Tucson and other places looking forward at that utterly unopened change on a brilliant idea, which is the Rare and Endangered Species Act. Thanks.
David, thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak on the subject? Michelle?
Michelle Salmon, Sierra Point Road, Brisbane. First of all, on the first issue that you talked about for the 10 Huckleberry Court, I'd just like to say that in the staff report, it says under Section G, this site is not at a wildland interface and would not impact native habitat. Actually, the site is at a wildland interface. It's the corner lot on Huckleberry Court, and right next to that backyard is a common space that's been planted with native plants, and right across the street from that is the habitat that has not yet been degraded by the developer. So we will be filing an appeal of this decision tomorrow, and I hope the council will see fit to allow the Planning Commission to hear the appeal and waive the $1,406 fee for that appeal. As far as the Northeast Ridge Unit 2 EIR addendum and the letter that Randy Brault, our Director of Public Works and City Engineer, wrote to Fish and Wildlife, it says in here, and Randy, Mr. Brault, used all of the correct buzzwords to get Fish and Wildlife to jump. Service issue a site activity permit for the purpose of protecting health, safety, property, and welfare of the existing homes and open space in this area. The city understands that the site activity permit for this proposed development is allowed under the San Bruno Mountain Area Habitat Conservation Plan. It goes on to talk about, the city's ability to effectively fight fire and everything, and it makes it sound like, gosh, people up there are just going to die tomorrow if we don't get to grade. And we could have another fire like the Wax Myrtle fire. We could have a big landslide or flood, and it'll be our fault because we didn't grade for this new 6 houses and development. And please accept this correspondence as the city's support for the immediate issuance of a site activity permit for the development of the 6 lots and streets shown on the attached exhibit based on health, safety, and welfare concerns. I'd like to know whose welfare we're talking about here. Certainly not the butterflies' welfare. Certainly not the people of Brisbane's welfare. We don't even follow our own laws that we worked so hard to set up. I feel so disenfranchised from what we tried to accomplish and what's going on right now. I mean, who told city staff that it was okay to circumvent the laws that we wrote, and the laws of this country? And so, Jesse Wild, really, of Fish and Wildlife, had no choice but to respond to this emergency request to protect the welfare and health and open space and property of the people living on the Northeast Ridge, and of course the developer and all the other interests. And so she wrote back and said, "Dear Mr. Brault, I received your letter January 22nd, 2007 at our Sacramento office requesting that we approve Brookfield Homes' proposed development plan for B Court in the Unit 2 portion of the Northeast Ridge vesting tentative map for the purposes of protecting health, safety, property, and welfare of the existing homes and open space in the area. We understand you would like to complete the slope stabilization, drainage improvements, and grading for the roads necessary to allow for flood and fire protection for the surrounding area. Recognizing this is an emergency situation, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will not obstruct any decision made by the City of Brisbane or San Mateo County for the response activities that must be taken to prevent the loss of human life and property. Please email me or call me if you have any questions concerning this response." I have questions concerning this response. I cannot believe you would play the health and safety and fire card so that you can grade to build 6 more houses. It's egregious. It's unbelievable. They do not have a legal take permit for the Calliope butterfly. Why is the Planning Commission even bothering to decide or hear the EIR addendum if you're going to go ahead and circumvent the law like this? It's not right. And we need to go back to the values that we founded this town on and stand up for what we wrote and what we decided on as a whole, that's in our general plan, that everyone has agreed upon. And we have not done our job. It is up to the City of Brisbane to protect our part of the Northeast Ridge and the habitat. And we haven't done it. And we haven't done it to my satisfaction. I don't think we've done it to anyone's satisfaction except maybe the developer and the city staff. So I ask the council to please stop this grading now before any more archaeological sites or environmental sites or other sites are destroyed. I went up and looked at it today, and where the fire came down from Wax Myrtle Canyon, right along that little road along Silver Spot, there's been no safety buffer there. No, all the grading has occurred in the area where Brookfield Homes wants to build, including slopes that didn't need stabilizing because they had not previously been graded. So I don't know who's pulling the wool over whose eye here, but I don't think it's right. And I think the City Council and the City of Brisbane has a responsibility not only to the people of Brisbane, but to the habitat on the mountain and to the people of this country to not sell our future down the road for a handful of coins, even if the handful of coins is $4 million. It's just not worth it. It's your children's future. Are you really going to sell it out like this? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Same subject, Gary Pothiker.
Gary Pothiker, pleasure to be here. I didn't come with any specific thoughts in mind or to make any specific reference to the issues at hand with this issue. I did want to mention something, though. I moved here 22 years ago or whatever, and at the onset of that, the name David Schooley had come up as someone who was concerned about the well-being of the environment, and especially San Bruno Mountain. During the time I've been here, he has been consistent, thorough, outspoken, and comes from what I want to call a good heart, as well as many other situations. And with respect to David Schooley, several things. Many times in politics, whether in this city, state, or federal, the issues of the people are somewhat put on a back burner because of political or, how can I say, political, economic, whatever concerns are at hand that people in power tend to overlook. I think what I've perceived from David and a number of other people, but I want to say specifically David because I really appreciate the work he's done, is in the coal mines, I think they have canaries, or they used to have canaries. And they'd always be concerned about the canary because the canary would kind of state what the state of the well-being was within the mining facility or the mine. And I don't want it to mean David, but I think David's the canary. And he's looking deeper. He feels deeper about it, and he's dealing with it at a much different level. I'd like to commend him, and I'd like the council to be aware that I really feel he's coming from that point of view, which many times people in the position of council or staff aren't able to do. Thank you, or have a difficult time in doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. There was another hand in the back.
Mary Gudikatz, Brisbane resident. I think every member of the council remembers that we spend tens of thousands of dollars every year trying to restore degraded habitat in Brisbane. That we have an open space plan that sets aside, says that the city is going to set aside upwards of $80,000 a year for purchasing open space to preserve the habitat. We've started a new work session in the Brisbane Acres to restore habitat, to have volunteers from the city come out and restore the habitat. And, you know, asking people to give up their spare time and their energy, and believe me, it's hard work, getting out there on the mountain and trying to restore some of this habitat that is really dangerous, really seriously in danger. And at the same time, the city goes and looks for excuses to just go and erase some habitat that can never be replaced. Looks for an excuse to circumvent the Endangered Species Act. I am as appalled as some of these other speakers are, and I think it makes hypocrites of all of us. If we don't look seriously at the value of the resource that is being very blithely thrown away just because some developer wants to build another couple of houses that, frankly, I don't think very many of the people in this room, very many of the people in this town could even afford to buy. I think that the council should take action that is consistent with our concern for the preservation of our very precious biological resources in this town.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Is that a yes, Dana?
You be the judge. I don't mean to be flip, actually. I had made comments earlier about the 10 Huckleberry Court issue, and it's not included in this packet, but I do notice that every council, or I believe every council member received it. And my concerns about the abuse of calling certain things minor modifications that don't take into account of the fact that what was approved, I think in 88 or 89, and what is currently in Landmark is 25% larger than was originally approved. So the homes on the Landmark have already received consideration for a major modification. If every person in town were to increase the size of their homes by 25%, you could imagine what the impacts would be. So I'm concerned that looking at this, although it seems really innocuous, it sets a precedent, and it doesn't give everybody else the opportunity to have the same amount of square footage given to them as a minor modification. I'm concerned about the fact that there really wasn't a whole lot of notice about this, and that to appeal it, a person only has a 7-day appeal. And also the barrier of the cost of the appeal. A long time ago, when the city set the limit, the cost for appeals, they said it would be 50% of what the person had posted. I've been told through the through people who have looked into it, that they're being asked to match 100% of the cost of the permit, and that this sets a burden to the public and sets it very difficult for the opportunity of something that's done very quickly, and oftentimes people will not know that the modification has been allowed until bulldozers or the trucks show up to do the work. So I still have concern about 10 Huckleberry Court, which you have somewhat skipped over, or hope there to be further discussion about it. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience wish to be heard? Please.
Glenn Fieldman. I live on Alvarado Street in Brisbane. I think it was Paul Ehrlich who compared the loss of species on our planet to the popping of rivets out of an airplane. He asked the question, how many rivets will disappear before the airplane crashes? Just last week, the World Conservation Union, which used to be known as the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, issued a really horrific and frightening report saying that we're on track to lose about half of all species on this planet by the year 2100. Here right next to Brisbane, we have a couple of those species. The people of this community have made pretty clear choices, and they've made a lot of policy over the years saying that they took a stand to preserve what we have and to strictly limit the ability of developers to expand should it jeopardize the habitat of endangered species. And I respectfully ask the council to stick by that. It's not only what the residents of Brisbane wanted, but it's a little version of the choices that we're going to have to make to save this planet. I don't think that's really an exaggeration. If you read the literature on the environment, some very credible people now are saying that we are approaching a global ecological collapse. I think we're just a small part of that, but we should keep in mind that those bigger processes that are at work and the fact that we have smaller choices that we can make that will either exacerbate those processes or help to slow them down. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to be heard? Okay. Council discussion. Clark, do you want to start?
Yeah, I heard a couple things I'd kind of like staff to address. One, you said that the fence lines were moved, the HCP fence lines were moved. Was there any movement of fence lines?
So if and when there's movement to the fence lines, that's as permitted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Habitat Conservation Plan Site Activity Permit operator.
So
It's not directed by the city.
a fence line was moved in?
I'm aware of it being moved at least once in the 6 years I've been here, yes.
I mean, on this particular project.
I can't answer that one.
I went up and looked at it today, and I looked at the fence line specifically, and I didn't see a fence line moved, and that's what I want to know. I mean, that's what is being alleged here, is that the fence lines have been moved. So anything on one side of the fence line is HCP area, and
Well,
then
it's all HCP, of course, sir, but
yeah, the
one
whole
side of
area.
it is no touch, the other side of it is touch, I think.
There was the thing about no legal take permit in this. You have any?
Well, sure, sir. That sort of segues into some remarks I'd like to make here. I think the first distinction I want to make is the authority that the city and the city engineer has to issue grading permits under Chapter 15 of the Municipal Code, and the authority that the federal agencies involved in the HCP have. Within the city of Brisbane, I can issue grading permits, so I can let people excavate, they can stockpile, they can move dirt, they can cut roads, they can do that sort of thing. Nowhere within the city of Brisbane limits, nowhere within the HCP do I have authority to allow takes of habitat or endangered species. That falls under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and it falls under the Habitat Conservation Plan operator, who has to issue a site activity permit in conjunction with the Fish and Wildlife Service. And that speaks to the very reason why I sent a letter to Fish and Wildlife Service. I needed their permission to grant that grading permit. Although, in fact, I could have issued the grading permit and said, developer, it's up to you, you get the permission. But I realized that this is, in fact, a sensitive area. I think everyone on staff is attuned to that, and we recognize and we respect that there are people in the city who don't necessarily agree or approve of the development. They don't necessarily agree or approve of the HCP and the current way it's being operated, and we understand that. But there are certainly rules and regulations that we work under, and we're trying to follow those to the very best of our ability. So that does speak to why the letter was sent to Ms. Wild. And as Ms. Salmon quoted, she read the letter exactly as I wrote it. It's a true statement. I sent that letter to Ms. Wild, and I said that I was recommending they issue that for the purposes of protecting health, safety, property, and welfare of the existing homes and open space in the area. And I back that to this day. Quite frankly, there were significant concerns. There was a disturbed, undocumented slope that approached 14 feet in height immediately above Golden Aster. The whole area itself had been disturbed over 10 years ago. There was a sediment basin on site that was starting to become questionable. There was uncontrolled erosion, partially on that site, mostly off that site, coming down to us from the county-owned portion of the HCP. There was no access for fire department equipment behind these homes. There was no water mains available to fire department equipment behind these homes to access and protect Golden Aster. And I think many of you know, and you've seen me appear before you in these other items, where when there's a landslide in town, I'm the person who's responsible for those. I'm the person who has to go out and clean those. I'm the person who has to mitigate those. In fact, we're on our final week of repairing that minor catastrophe that occurred at 837 Humboldt. I'm the person that signs off on our mitigation plan that talks about where we have landslide areas, and that I'm responsible for doing those things. I think you're also well aware that I'm the director of the Office of Emergency Services here. I'm responsible for coordinating with our fire departments and our police departments and making sure that we can respond and doing things that fall into the purview of the Public Works Department. And again, while I said I respect that people have differences of opinions, I clearly follow the rules and regulations that are in place here, and I will not apologize for putting public health, welfare, and safety as the forefront. I cannot. I'm not going to sit here and allow homes to be destroyed or to allow even the habitat off-site from here to be damaged because we didn't control the erosion that was coming down for it. So I think the reasons that were in that letter in January are in fact valid, and I've told you I stand by them. Fish and Wildlife obviously thought they were valid. They approved it. They had the opportunity to say no, do something else. And they obviously did not think that what we were asking to do rose to that level of significance.
I mean, City Council approved this project in June, right? Is that right?
The final parcel map for it? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
In fact, you actually approved it, I believe, before the grading started.
Right.
And the reason we asked in advance, as I said, much of this area had been disturbed 12 years earlier, and the developer was finally at the point where he had completed all of the area immediately contiguous to this. So that was when the Golden Astor homes were finalized. And so now that abutted them right up to this area, that there were slopes that had been previously disturbed. It was an area that we said, I think it's clear, it had been disturbed in 1995, that in my opinion needed to be mitigated. And there were also issues that I thought needed to be resolved as far as being able to give emergency response vehicles access behind these homes to defend against fires. I mean, we've had at least 2 fires that have rolled up right up adjacent to those neighborhoods there. It seemed important to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I certainly have a great amount of respect for Mountain Watch and a lot of the citizens that spoke, and
yes, sir, as do I. I understand that they have
yeah, I guess, just looking at it, knowing what I know about the area, and I know it was disturbed back when that project started, and looking at it, I mean, I went and looked at the fence lines today, and I personally didn't see anything that was actually moved. I know there's people that are saying the fence lines were moved, but I'm not seeing it. I usually can tell what's disturbed, what's not disturbed. And I don't want to minimize or anything like that either, because I know it's shocking when you see a mound of soil build up. Sure. It's cut.
Yes, sir, and right now I'm not prepared to confirm or deny whether it was moved this summer, but what I can tell you is that prior to any grading work being conducted, there was an on-site pre-grading conference held. That's part of the regulations. Fish and Wildlife was present. Well, HCP was present. They gave it their stamp of approval. They said, yes, this is what we thought you were submitting plans for. This is what we thought you were doing. That's where we thought the fence was going to be. We understand the impact of the work, and they allowed it to continue.
I would like to see, again, I guess reiterate Michelle Salmon's question about the archaeological site and maybe the pictures taken. From what I understand, we may or may not have had an archaeologist up there or stopped at any point.
I'll have to consult with the planning director, sir, and see if we did that in '95 when we disturbed it and what the extent of it was. I'll be happy to get back to you.
Because this is previously disturbed area.
Yes, sir.
Is what you were saying. So at least a good portion of it was anyway.
Yes, sir.
Please.
So I guess was it the we're going to deal with one of these at a time. I'd like to make some comments on the other one also, but I'll wait until I hear from the council on this. Because, I mean, at this point, I guess what's being asked of us from the citizens is to stop it, but I don't know.
Well, sir, I think you've approved the final parcel map that approves it, right? So.
Other council questions or comments?
I have comments.
Please.
I don't know how many of you watched the Planet Earth. It was absolutely incredible and just mesmerized me. Just sat there and watched the lives of plants and animals that I would never ever see. I know the people that are in the audience with the passion that they talk about. I know they mean well. At the same time, I know the staff. The comments about developer paying them and so forth, I think it just reduces credibility of the person that makes that statement. I depend on your statements when you come here and you say this is happening. I like to believe what you say. I like to take that as the truth. And I appreciate all the work that Mountain Watch doing in this town. I'm very proud of all of you for the work that you're doing, for teaching me a lesson from all of that. And yet, I know the staff. I know that they want to make sure that they are following the laws. So I'm sitting here, and at the same time, there's a developer that has done, based on the laws that you want us to enforce, he has what exactly needs to do. So I'm sitting here and I'm saying, what do I do? Somebody's going to be upset, not happy. And this is a really tough decision. This is a very, very tough decision. So I do remember last time we asked, what would happen if we stop the grading right now? What are the pros and what are the cons? And again, I'm having some senior moments and I forgot what was the response. You know, when you get older.
So perhaps you clarify, is this grading continuing? Is it finished? Is it, where are we on that?
It's continuing, sir. It's still a work in process, and I think if the council wanted input on how you would potentially stop this and what impact that would have, I think I'd respectfully bounce that over to my colleague at the other table and see if the city attorney would like to give you an answer on that.
Input, please.
You're speechless.
First of all, I'm told that the improvements, and we're talking about slope stabilization and putting in drainage facilities and all the things Randy is talking about, you know, they are continuing, and I think they're due to be completed largely by the end of October, early November, just before the start of the rainy season. And it was that timing that prompted the request to get the approval. And I guess I can only emphasize the point that all work was done pursuant to permits issued by the city, pursuant to approvals granted by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They were out there on the site. To my knowledge, and again, I'd have to confirm this, but I'm not aware of any fences being moved. I do know the county people came out and took a look at this, and they've made a determination that all work is being done in accordance with the approvals that have been granted. So we're not aware of any violations. The other aspect, of course, is that a final map has been issued. So while someone might say, well, you issued the grading permit before the final map, and technically that's probably true in the sense that the grading permit, I believe, was issued maybe a week or two before the final map approval. And that was mainly to get the process started so that the grading would be completed before the start of the rainy season, and then we're coming right up to that deadline. But even if no permit had been issued at that time, upon issuance of the final map, all of the grading in connection with that development would have been authorized by the final map. But I think the point I want to emphasize is that the permits, contrary to charges that have been made, the permits were not issued to enable the development of 6 houses. The permits were issued in order to stabilize what the city engineer determined to be an unstable hillside, in order to provide drainage for an area that was putting silt and all sorts of other debris into the lagoon, and to avoid what was perceived in his professional judgment by the city engineer as a threat to the downslope homes. It was not to facilitate the development of 6 lots. Quite the contrary. When that permit was issued, there was a condition put on there, or a statement that expressly said that nothing in connection with the issuance of the permit constituted an approval for the development of the 6 homes. And the developer was doing it at their sole risk. Theoretically, if somehow that final map had been denied or there was some dispute over the 6 homes, there still would have been a requirement to do the grading. And that's something the city still would have insisted be done in order to alleviate what we perceive to be a hazard
both to persons and property and to the habitat. So if the city was now to back away from that, I guess, what would happen, I guess I would have to say, the developer has been granted all permits and approval. The developer has acted in accordance with the rules that we've established. We think staff has acted in accordance with the rules that have been established. And the argument is basically, well, we don't like the HCP, so ignore the rules. There may be objections to the HCP, but that's the rules that we live by at the moment. And the city has been making every effort to preserve as much habitat as we can and to make that plan a success, even though there are people who believe otherwise. But as to this particular grading permit, it was issued in accordance with rules that have been established, and we perceive no violation of either the HCP or the Endangered Species Act, or any of the agreements that have been entered into between the city and the developer and the HCP agreement.
Any other council comment or questions? Michael?
So I guess I have a question also for the city attorney, and that is that, is there any dispute that Calippi was taken?
There may have been a small area that was part of the activity permit that would have authorized, I think there was some viola there, and as has been said, if there's viola, you might make an assumption that Calippi is there. But again, the purpose of the modification to the project is not to restore habitat, but to preserve habitat and to move all the development off the hillside. Now, this is part, the 6 lots were part of that overall arrangement. The area of the take, which might have been like an acre, is far less than the area being preserved for Calippi habitat that otherwise would have been developed. And I don't remember the exact acreage, but yeah, there was a small amount taken, but it was taken in exchange for and that habitat had been determined by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be not high-quality habitat. And the trade-off was to take a small amount of that in exchange for the preservation of a very large area that was identified as prime Calippi habitat. I think the take was, Randy, maybe an acre or something like that, maybe less.
That's correct, right around that number.
Yeah.
And approximately how much then was preserved in another location for Calippi?
Robin, you want to help me out here? I think it was like 25 or something.
That would be good information to have.
Yeah, we have that information. I don't have it at my fingertips. We can certainly
Right.
provide that to the council. My recollection is, 25 to 30 acres, something like that.
I'd appreciate that information, and maybe also if that could be provided to Mountain Watch, yeah, if they don't already have it, that might help. Another thing that might help, and this is just for information as well, and that is that all these disturbed areas are, or the recently graded areas, I should say, they're a dramatic difference from the way the site appeared a couple of months ago. So I, like Clark, went up and visited this location about a week ago, and it was before I learned about all the permits, that the grading had been done. And I was so amazed by the change that I called up the planning department and found out what was going on and the reason why it was going on. But it's the scale of it, and the look, and it came as a surprise, I think, to a lot of people. And so I'm wondering if, because the reasons for the grading were known. I mean, there's erosion, there was siltation going to the lagoon. If maybe there's a map available that outlines the areas of geologic or grade problems, with an identification on those areas as to why they required emergency grading, just so that we all have a good understanding of at least the reasons behind this. Because earlier Michelle Salmon was asking what are the health, safety, and property reasons for the grading. I think that if we can identify those on the land, it might help us all understand the issues better. Those are just a couple of informational items I had.
Okay. Si,
Yes, sir. What is the sequence of events as far as an archaeologist goes? Are you required to have one on site, or do you run into a problem and then say, okay, you better come out and take a look at what we have here? And I'm not sure how that works. So
I'll let the planning director take it.
I've heard enough of them in San Francisco, but
Mr. Mayor, through the chair, there's generally, I mean, this goes back to the addendum that was done on the property in 1989. And
please speak up, Bill.
excuse me. This, of course, would go back to all the way back to the original EIR in '83, but in 1989, when there was an addendum done, and that, again, that was before I was the planning director. It was Carol Nelson would have. I'm not sure. She didn't get to town just around that time or afterwards. But anyways, as you've seen in these the CEQA process, in doing that addendum, they would do an initial study, and it would look at those 16, 18 areas of environmental concerns that CEQA requires be addressed, and it would determine whether there was any significance in the area of archaeology. It could have resulted in there could have been by the environmental consultant, a reconnaissance of the surface of the area, which is typically what's done first, to see if there's any evidence whatsoever of any kind of artifact, so if they're at the surface. If not, and if through a search of the records at the university archive, for lack of specificity at the moment, there would have been either reason to believe there could be artifacts or cultural remains or not. So between a search of the records and a surface reconnaissance is generally what's done to try and determine whether archaeology is significant. However, it's a condition, the condition that's in the Northeast Ridge is typical. I've seen it in many jurisdictions, certainly in Southern California as well as up here in the Bay Area, where because of the uncertainty of what might happen once excavation or grading started and so forth, you would have a condition similar to the one that's attached to this, that if any evidence were to be encountered of archaeological artifacts, that construction would stop and an expert would be called in to determine what's going on there. But you know, the land surface is so extensive, and archaeological sites, you know, statistically are dense or not dense. And it's my understanding that there's, and Fred may know the answer to this, but because I think we've talked about it before, I know there is one identified archaeological site on the mountain.
Probably several, but I think there's
one that has some research associated with it. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. So that is typically the way that is handled. They don't do a full-blown trenching archaeological analysis when there's no evidence whatsoever either in the record, the archive, or on the surface reconnaissance that there would be any reason to suspect there would be. So typically conditions are attached that subsequently, should some be discovered during construction, then construction would stop and an investigation would be done at that point.
That's not what it says in the law.
Please, Michelle. Okay. You had your chance, you'll get another one.
thank you. I think some of these questions were answered earlier. My question now is, the grading was done for public safety, correct? Where do we go from here? And I mean, what does the developer do from here? Now, he's got this area graded out. Obviously, he's going to build. Is that what he's up to?
Well, sir, let me go back in time just a little bit. In the 2 weeks before the council approved the final parcel map, the grading permit was issued.
Okay.
On that grading permit, the condition that the city attorney referenced, which I wrote in there for a reason, it says, approval of this work shall not be construed as final approval of future finished grades for any ultimate land use that may be proposed by the applicant. So in other words, had this stability work that was being done at the time, and this work for emergency vehicle access being done at the time, not ended up being rolled into an extension that was anticipated but not guaranteed to be approved by the City Council, then the developer would have been left where he was, having done that work at his behest. And perhaps if something had turned completely upside down on the project and there were to be no further development, the city might require even further long-term stability actions to have occurred there. Okay. However, as I said, 2 weeks after this permit was issued, and I think, I'd have to go back and check the chronology in time. I think the grading actually hadn't even started yet. The council, the council approved the final parcel map, which gave the developer permission to build the 6 lots. So now he's doing the grading permit, and he's also preparing to build the building pads for the 6 lots. He has approval for both of those at this point in time.
Yep. If the grading was done for public safety reasons, partially for public safety reasons, how will these new homes that he's going to build, how will they be affected? Will they be affected by, will you have a barrier there? Or can they be threatened by fire now? Will they be extending into the...
No, they won't, because the nature of the development is different than what occurred on Golden Aster, where it's up against a steep slope back behind it. This is a flattened off type pad.
Thank you.
Sir.
I don't want the details all to get lost in the great protest. There's been one request for action, and that is that we grant a fee waiver with respect to an appeal to be filed tomorrow on 10 Huckleberry. Does the council wish to act on that?
We haven't talked about 10 Huckleberry yet. I think there's probably still people that want to comment.
Yeah.
On this one.
Terry O'Connell?
Hello, Terry O'Connell, Brisbane resident. As Randy said in his report to the council, the developer had run out of work. He wanted to build. And by building the cul-de-sac and getting it in before the rainy season, he's basically guaranteed that he's going to be able to build there. The Fish and Wildlife has not issued the take permit for those homes yet. The EIR has not been certified, and I think the actions of the city are premature. Incidental, that's a key word here. When they talk about a take permit, it's an incidental take. It's like, oops, we built some house, we're going to take some habitat. It's incidental. It's the same way that building a cul-de-sac is incidental to fire control. If we build homes along there, there's still not going to be fire safety for the homes that go behind that. Where are we going to stop? When we get all the way up to Guadalupe and then it's not an emergency situation? If this emergency or slope stability needed to be done, then the developer should have written the letter to Fish and Wildlife to get this emergency taken care of. The city should not have acted on the developer's behalf to get an emergency grading take permit when everyone knows that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife can't say no to a city for health and safety reasons. It was just an incidental take, and there is nothing incidental about this. It's a willful and wanton take and a way to circumvent the laws that we have and that the laws that the endangered species protect the area with. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Howard?
Hello, Robert Howard, Clippy Court. Several weeks back, up at Altamar at the Ridge, we had a representative of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service come visit, and it was an open meeting. They'd come up there just to talk to people about what was going on in the mountain and what have you. And people asked a number of questions, different people from different parts of town and what have you. And one person asked about the grading over there and how it occurred, and they basically said If a city engineer sends a letter to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it is policy at the highest level to automatically issue a permit. They don't question one way or another what goes on with the letter. They don't send anybody out. They just issue the permit. The only reason I'm saying this, I wanted to be on the record what we were told by a representative of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I also have some photos I took when I was on a hike up on the old Guadalupe Canyon Road, which looks down on that site from before the current round of grading took place. There are no obvious steep slopes there. If you want to look, I can show you the photos. Now, I remember the wax myrtle fire. The wax myrtle fire occurred because of the incompetence of CDF when they were doing the supposed controlled burn. At that time, it got out of control. The lack of water was due to the fact that Brookfield failed to put a fire hydrant in on Silver Spot near Mission Blue. That fire hydrant has since been put in. Landmark was still under construction at that point, and not all their hydrants had been put in or working at that point. So the situation, the baseline that has been referred to now for water supply there is different from what happened when the fire actually occurred. Also, they talk about this being an emergency for emergency fire prevention. Then why are they filling up the water reservoir that was downslope between Guadalupe Canyon Parkway and where the graded area is where the homes are? Because in a typical fire situation, CDF would use pumps and portable pumps to pump that water out to use for fire extinguishing. And don't shake your head, Randy, because I know a bunch of people work for CDF.
Please, let's just address the council.
Okay? And if you want to see a photo or two, I can come and show you now or later.
How about later on? Thank you.
Okay.
John Burr.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is John Christopher Burr, and I'm proud to be a lifelong resident of Brisbane. Dr. James Hansen, who is the director of NASA's Goddard Space Institute, has discussed in great detail on behalf of the state of California as an expert, for example, in litigation, that we're in a global climate crisis. He's one of the world's most foremost authorities, and he talks about a tipping point, and that we can't engage in business as usual. We simply can't do that anymore. Our planet cannot afford it. And then, of course, there's the eminent Harvard biologist E.O. Wilson, who has declared that San Bruno Mountain is on the top 10 list, the top 10 hotspots for endangered species on the entire planet. And that's just our little mountain. Now, I had a conversation one night with the former Secretary of Interior, Bruce Babbitt, and I talked about some of the problems. We had a conversation, and we talked about many of the problems in regard to San Bruno Mountain, the faked-up biology, the faked-up reports, and those sorts of things. And he, of course, said, well, it was the very first one in the nation. Naturally, there are going to be a lot of mistakes, but I recognize it was an abortion. And so we already know we're off to a bad start simply because it was the very first one. Naturally, lots of mistakes were made, and we're leaving with that today and trying to correct it. And I think it's important to note, too, that under the Bush administration, that truthful administration that never lies to people, that the Fish and Wildlife Service is greatly underfunded. So you can't really expect them to, be on the lookout for every little problem that comes along. I don't think they have a civil engineer on staff, for example. So if some city engineer, whether through negligence or inadvertence or corruption or whatever in any of the surrounding communities tells them that there's an emergency, they have no way to check it. So that's no excuse here. What I'd like to know is, this is a supposed emergency. And I've seen a lot of real estate speculators and a variety of what I would call corrupt city officials in other jurisdictions, I'm not saying Brisbane, abuse the emergency process. And they do it to destroy wetlands, and they come up with these phony emergency rationalizations in order to kill endangered species, in order to kill vital wetlands of San Francisco Bay, for example. And I'd like to know, were there any insurance claims here? Were any notifications received by insurance companies saying, you've got an emergency situation here, you've got to deal with it? Or was there an emergency declared by the governor of the state of California? That's the proper authority to declare emergency, not city engineers, not police people. You know, this is something very important. As I said, it's one of the 10 most critical areas in the entire world for endangered species. So we can't just say, oh, let's just, you know, say that under this plan or this proposal, it's less valuable habitat. The question under the Endangered Species Act is not less valuable habitat versus valuable habitat. The question is, you're destroying habitat, period. I just have a couple of more questions. Were there any requests to FEMA to support this emergency, this supposed emergency? Is there any objective, verifiable facts that existed at the time that we can look at today, that existed at the time that the city engineer made this declaration of emergency? Because it looks like a unilateral act, and it looks like it's really unsupported. And I'm not asking for post hoc, faked up rationalizations. I want to know if there was any evidence, objective, verifiable evidence at the time that this was done. Because it looks like it's an emergency because I say so. That's what it looks like happened here. And I'm just a member of the public. And the problem is with that is it's probably the mayor and the city council that should be declaring emergencies. I'd like to know if there was any correspondence to you folks saying, we have a state of emergency here. I don't think so. I don't think you have that. But if you do, you should share it with the public. And that would be at the time that the declaration was made. So I don't think you have any, I don't think there's any evidence here. I don't believe that there was a real emergency. I believe that the process should have been followed but wasn't. And that this is a clear attempt to circumvent the law. Now the problem with that is if it's found, wait a second, one last point. If it's found by a court challenge or in court, the city engineer acted without lawful authority here, he could be liable for $50,000 a day in damages for violations of the Endangered Species Act. I'm not certain if the city can be found as he's the city's agent supposedly, and of course the real estate speculator here could be found $50,000 a day too. So we're talking a lot of money here. I don't think this is a laughing matter. So I hope that in the future you guys are more careful with this, and perhaps you should put some clamps on people going off on frolics on their own.
Thank you, John. Ken McIntyre.
Hi, council members. I wanted to try to clarify a couple things. With regard to the HCP fence, when I first went over there and looked at it, I was concerned that they had strayed beyond the boundaries of the little map that's in here. So I made a couple of phone calls. I called Thomas Reed Associates. I talked to the county, which has since taken over their job, and I called Jesse Wild at Fish and Wildlife Service. And Thomas Reed Associates told me that the fence had been moved. I mean, it was all part of the process. They had to move the fence in order to do the grading, and that's what the city gave them permission to do, is move that fence. In these couple of letters, I just keep getting puzzled by one line here in Randy's letter to Jesse Wild, and that is the immediate development of these pads, streets, and homes will complete all necessary improvements, provide the city with the capabilities to address these concerns. What on earth do the homes have to do with providing fire safety? And, you know, what if those homes, you know, which is also a question that we're looking into, those homes on Golden Aster, if they had not been built, and I'm not sure under what circumstances they were built, it's a gray area to me. If they had not been built, then presumably B Court would not have had to been developed to protect them by fire. And then what does happen after these 6 homes get built? Do they need to be protected as well? And the other thing I want to point out to you is on the letter back, the Fish and Wildlife Service probably had their lawyers look at it because they kind of cleverly don't take responsibility here. They say, recognizing this as an emergency situation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will not obstruct any decision made by the City of Brisbane or San Mateo County. They don't say, we approve of what you're doing. They just say, we won't stop it. So I think they're, far from giving the endorsement that's been implied here, they were just saying they won't obstruct it. And as was said earlier, the Fish and Wildlife person told us, well, we don't have an engineer. We take people's word for it.
Thank you. Michelle Salmon.
Michelle Salmon, Sierra Point Road, Brisbane. There's a couple of things that I want to bring up, and one is that Seppi, you said that it wasn't nice to accuse city staff of being paid by the developer, and I certainly didn't accuse them of being paid by the developer, but it raises the question of where do the funds come from for the city staff that works on the Northeast Ridge development? It doesn't come from our tax dollars, so anyway. And Mr. Topple, our lawyer, said that, well, the rules that we live by, and yet we're not living by the rules that we wrote. I ask again, it says again, this section, in the 1989 EIR addendum, prior to the issuance of a grading permit, the applicant shall provide written evidence to the planning director that a qualified archaeologist has been notified and retained to be on site as required by the planning director during grading and other significant ground disturbing activity. We issued a grading permit, but I don't see any written evidence about this grading permit. Yeah, we have stuff from 1974. Nothing here now, these rules. So what about the rules that we live by? I guess I just have to really stress that. And then there was talk about, how the 108 units didn't get built up on the grassland on the ridge. Well, that was because there's high tension wires running through there that PG&E won't move. And so this is a case where less is more. We lost 108 townhouse units so that the developer could build 71 or 77 single-family dwellings for a much greater profit margin. So I just really, I feel like we're not getting the clear picture here, and I feel like there's a lot of obscurity going on, and I'm really concerned about it, and I feel like if we're gonna rules that we live by, well then if we made the rules then we should live by them, and I don't see where we are. And it's not about how bad the HCP is. We're not even living by the rules that we made that enabled the HCP to happen. So I do call for a brand new environmental impact report that's not 30 years old. And when we talk about public safety, at the last Planning Commission meeting, I brought some compressed rock from the huge landslide that happened above the school that did endanger the school and public safety. And it's the same type of cut and fill that we're doing right now over there at the Northeast Ridge, because we haven't updated an EIR that was written with data over 30 years ago. I think we've learned a little bit more about geotechnical aspects of cut and fill and landslides since then. So I don't know why we're not living by the rules that we made. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Now, in the interest of getting through tonight's agenda, and we have to get to the construction bids.
Yeah. Well, I have another question, though. There was an allegation about the EIR not being certified, and,
The 1989, well, the original EIR was certified, the 1989 addendum was approved. These 6 lots are not subject to the 2007 addendum, which is currently being reviewed because that's as part of the modification of the project. These 6 lots were excluded from the HCP amendment, so they're not subject to the proceedings being conducted by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service either, and they were excluded on the ground that the area had already been disturbed and had no great habitat value. So on that basis, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service allowed the work to proceed. We would not have issued a permit. I mean, you can wordsmith it all you want, but the fact of the matter is, without their concurrence, and they were at the site, and they did look at the boundary lines of the grading. But these 6 lots are not subject to the EIR process, and I should say the NEPA process being conducted by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the HCP amendment.
okay. One other thing, Randy, I guess might require some investigation, but again, Ken McIntyre said that the Thomas Reed and Associates, the county, and Fish and Wildlife approved the removal of the fence, and I still didn't see any fence being moved, and I want to know if a fence was moved or not, and if it was, where, who, and who approved that.
Sorry, I told you earlier, or I'm sorry, I told one of the council members earlier that I'd be happy to look into that, I couldn't give you an answer right now, but as I told you earlier,
Right.
they're the people who are responsible for whether that fence was relocated or not. It's not the city telling them to move the HCP. It is, in fact, the Fish and Wildlife, the HCP, the plant operator. Those were the right people for Mr. McIntyre to ask.
Yeah.
As far as permission to move it. It was good that he did that.
All right.
I don't think there's any action on the agenda for tonight, other than to consider the request that Michelle Salmon or someone made to waive a bond requirement for appealing the thing on 10 Huckleberry. Does the council wish to act on that request or not?
I would do it.
I'm okay with waiving it.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
Is there any discussion?
No.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I'm going to declare a break, and then we will move into new business.
Stu. My buddy from Stu? Take that abuse? Well, the good news is I can leave shortly after this.
All right, everybody sit down, please.
Thanks.
We're now on item A of new business to consider approving the contract for City Hall Improvements Project, the amount of $5,810,000 with Scala Construction. Proceed.
From last week, the council asked some questions that I believe the city attorney has responded to you with. Apologize, those got to you late today, and that was an error on my part. The council also requested that the contractor and subcontractor in question last week also appear, and I believe they are here. And I'd like to turn it over to the city engineer who would like to introduce to you the people who will be working with us in terms of contract compliance.
Randy?
Yes, sir. Pursuant to your request from our last meeting, you had asked that a representative from Glass Architects be here. So Rob Carden is seated over here next to the microphone. You've seen him before as we were talking about the project.
Glad you're here. You should have been here last week. It was exciting.
Sir, I believe that both of our consultants are claiming additional time and cost for the penance of having to be second on the agenda for this evening. But also with us this evening is James Wilshinsky, seated here in the black polo shirt. James is representing JMW, the construction management firm of the contract that was approved at the last meeting. And as the city manager mentioned to you, there are a couple of memorandums that you have. You've got one from me, which was really just a matter of supplemental information. There were a number of letters that were provided directly to council members prior to the last staff report, so all of those have been included in here, so they're part of a record. There are also a number of letters that are rebuttals to some of those comments, and those letters have been presented to us via the general contractor, his subcontractors, and legal counsel representing the subcontractors. Also within your staff report, the memorandum that's attached to the staff report, there's a spreadsheet showing all of the contractors that were listed by all of the generals. It's just, I don't know whether that's helpful to you or not, but it sort of hones in on what the issue is. It's really, 3 contractors that we're talking about that are subject of protest. I found it interesting just because in some cases there were up to 28 contractors or subcontractors that were listed on a project, and really, if I understand correctly, what it is there are 2 electrical subcontractors that are subject of concern, and there's 1 plumbing mechanical contractor that's a subject of concern. And with the electrical contractors, it's only interesting from the spreadsheet because as you go down there, you see that it's not just the first low bidders, the second, third, and fourth low bidders that there are concerns about the listed subs. And the 5th and final subcontractor, the highest bidder, did not list an electrical subcontractor, so we're presuming from that he had the appropriate licenses and was intending to do it with his own staff. So with that, I think we're happy to take questions and proceed in any way that pleases the council.
Are there council member questions?
Yes.
Please go ahead, Clark.
First of all, I guess if the city attorney is okay to ask contractor and subcontractor questions.
I think the council can certainly ask the contractor questions. We're about to award a large contract, and if you have questions concerning their ability to perform, they're certainly legitimate. I have given the council a memo containing my interpretation of the public contract code in terms of a request by the city to directly disqualify a subcontractor, but in terms of questioning the general contractor, that I think you certainly have every right to pose whatever questions you like relative to their ability to perform.
Can you question the subcontractor?
I can't say you can't, but I do believe the scope of action by the council is limited by the Public Contracts Code and whether the general contractor makes a request for a substitution or not.
Okay. In that context, Clark, do you have questions you wish to ask?
I'd like to ask, I guess the electrical contractor. I'm not sure who they are.
The name's European Quality Electric, sir.
Yeah, European Quality Electric. If you have a representative from there. Yeah. Could you please
go to the podium, please? Thank you.
My name is Farshid Samsami.
How you doing? Welcome.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, sir, how many employees do you have?
At the moment, we have 3.
3 employees, and they are electricians?
All of them.
They're certified electricians?
They're licensed by the California, yes.
They're licensed? They're contracted?
Yes, they're contracted licensed, so that gives them certification.
Oh, so they're direct employees of yours? Then?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. And do you pay workmen's compensation?
We do, yes. I'm a general contractor as well, Solid Builders, and we are acquiring actually European Quality. And under Solid Builders, European Quality has done work as a sub to us, Solid Builders. And under our worksman comp, we cover there.
Okay. Are you going to be paying prevailing wage to your employees?
Yes.
And do you have apprentices?
We are interviewing 2 at the moment.
And they're in a certified apprentice program?
Correct. Yes, they are.
Okay. And so how many employees do you expect to have dedicated to this job?
5 or 6.
5 or 6?
Yes.
And of those, how many will be apprentices?
I would suspect 3 journeymen, electrician, and 3 apprentices.
3?
Yes.
And who's the...
It depends on their schedule, and we have to, of course, we've got to go into details. Maybe at the peak, we might have to have more or less, but that's what the plan is.
I read your letter in here, and you had no complaints about anything. Is that right?
I can give you a list of references from San Francisco Unified School District, City of Redwood City, State, California State. We did a project, 455 Golden Gate, a high-rise, numerous clients, private or public. And we've done quite a bit at 1000 Marine Hub, by the way.
Okay.
Brisbane.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
May I ask the general contractor?
My name is Alex Swidler, and I'm with SCI.
Welcome, Alex. I don't know if any other council members have questions as you go on. Alex, how are you going to ensure that your electrical sub is going to follow what he just said of having apprentices and paid employees and they get prevailing wage?
It's a practice which we are using for the actually last 10 years. I'm working on the public market. We are checking all certified payrolls before we give it to the city. And we also, before the project starts, that's in our practice, I make sure the request, all the subcontractors send the written request to the appropriate authority for the apprentices to the project, and we are checking basically what's going on a weekly basis as they return their payrolls to us.
Okay. And then is that something, I guess, Randy, we're going to have our project manager, James, you'll be checking that out to verify that these practices are being met?
Oh, sorry. Sir, it's my understanding that the San Mateo County electrical construction industry was going to take care of that for us, because I think Mr. Fitzpatrick has clearly told me that he's going to be on site and helping us through that, so I'm sure we'll have plenty of oversight there.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And anybody else have questions?
After you ask all of your questions, I want to recite and see if I understand what the conclusion is.
Okay, I don't think he's asked
I
all
know,
of his
that's what I
questions.
said after he finishes.
Okay. Is the plumbing contractor, subcontractor here? Oh, sir, could you please ask you a few things?
Jan Targan with Black Sea Corporation.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for coming tonight. I wanted to ask you, I know right now you're currently in litigation, is that correct?
It is correct.
Yeah. And purpose of that litigation is for what?
On this question, my legal attorney
can answer.
Okay. Is that something, sir, that you are willing to answer or can answer? Or?
Well, I'd be happy to answer what you need.
Okay, good. Yeah.
My name is Harold Jaffe, and I'm here representing Jan Targan and Black Sea Corporation. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions, sir, concerning any litigation.
Yeah, I guess without getting into your litigation, but I guess your client has been accused of what?
They have accused him of not paying prevailing wage on certain jobs.
Mm-hmm.
One person, Mr. Vasquez, has made that claim.
And I guess, sir, if you could, again. I'm sorry, but we have to get all this on tape.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So, sir, are you going to be paying prevailing wage on this job?
Yes, we are paying prevailing wage on all our jobs.
And how many employees do you have?
Today, 6 people in the field.
6 full-time? And are
Yes.
they a mixture of journeymen?
One apprentice, 5 journeymen.
And how many apprentices are going to be working on the job there?
On this project, I'm planning 4 journeymen, 2 apprentices.
And all these are your plumbers, or have they gone through the proper training and everything like that as far as being certified plumbers?
Yes, they went through ABC program, and we are certified as training company for the ABC.
And who's ABC?
ABC is Associated Builders Contractors.
Oh, okay.
That's
all right. And you'll be paying like your scales to prevailing wage and everything like that. And then the contractor, same question to you on that, and you're going to ensure that that takes care. And James, I guess you'll ensure that that's being done. Those practices are being followed. I mean, it seems like a lot of work, you know, to paper trail. Okay, thank you, sir. And,
once again, I'm Rob Carden from Glass Architects.
Okay.
I had a chance to speak to both the electrical contractors union and the plumbing contractors union. Both gentlemen that wrote the letters, they both indicated that they would be requesting certified payroll also. So a lot of that work is going to be done by those union folks that are looking at that. I just wanted to clarify that point for you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. James, do you have any comments as far as...
Excuse me, James. You got to step to the mic, please.
Sorry.
James Olsensky, JMW Consulting. As a matter of my practice in running public works contracts, I do have a process in which I do track all the employees that do come on the site, subcontractors and subcontractors, the days that they're there, and then I do match the certified payrolls to those days. Additionally, I have what I call an employee interview, where I'll actually ask the employees that are there, are you getting paid certified? Are you getting paid prevailing wage? Do you know what prevailing wage is? You get paid benefits and such. And if the answers are not, if they answer no, or something doesn't seem right, then I can resort to like employee industrial relations to have them investigate also.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have at the moment.
Are there other questions?
I have a couple, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry?
The electrical contractor, are you a C10 certified? I don't know what C10 is.
Is the license?
Yes.
For the electric one?
Please.
It's the procedure, sorry.
No problem.
And again, state your name.
Farshid Samsami. And yes, C10 is for the electrical license issued by the California Licensing Board.
You have a C10 license?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Now, you mentioned to Mr. Conway here that you're not going to be doing this job alone, is that correct?
He said he was going to have employees.
Yes, I don't understand. I
In
didn't
other
say
words-
we're not going to do it alone.
Are you going to be the only electrician on the job?
The only electrical contractor, yes.
The only electric contractor,
Yes,
but I
yes,
mean,
yes.
the only person that's going to do the work.
Correct.
That's, okay. So
I'm not
you're-
sure if I understand the question correctly. We're the only subcontractor that's going to be doing the work. I have several electricians who are
But you're
going
going
to
to
get the
have
site.
additional electricians,
Of
right?
course.
And these are all certified personnel?
Yes, they are, and they're union or otherwise, any other agency, they're welcome to check their certification.
Okay, sir. I think I had one, and this is not for you. Thank you, sir. You've answered my question. This is for, this looks like the city attorney. It says there is a potential liability for a city who accepts a bid that is lower than its own estimate when the reason for the bargain price is the construction contractors intend to pay less than the law allows.
I suppose as an abstract concept that's probably true, but in this case, we have no knowledge that this contractor intends to pay anything other than prevailing wage. I think that's in a situation where the city may have colluded with the contractor to take a lower bid, knowing that the contractor is going to intentionally violate the law, and we have absolutely no evidence that that is the case here.
So, as far as you are going to be paying workman's comp, you are paying prevailing wage, you're doing what most union shops do, is that correct, sir? I'm sorry, I should have asked that before, but
It's a process.
actually, I need the exercise you're doing, not you.
I could use one. Yes to all of them.
Yes to all of them.
Yes, we are.
Then tell me something, Mr.
Sure.
Sir, why are you having a problem with the labor union?
I don't. I think they do with us.
That's a philosophical issue, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure
We
they
can
do.
get into that area. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really
I don't
beyond
think
the
we do.
scope of what we're looking at here.
Okay. Thank you very much for your kindness.
You sure?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you. Thank you. Next time, I'm going to jump up and run to the mic.
Any other council questions?
I'd like to hear, are you going to talk?
He's going to talk when I give him an opportunity. Are there any other council questions?
I'm going to wait until they're done.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address the council on this matter?
Yes, good evening, Council. My name is Dominic Nolan. I'm the business manager for the IBW Local 617, the Electricians Union. And I had a question tonight, perhaps the council can ask the contractor performing the electrical work. I believe I heard the gentleman say that it was a general contractor's license he has, European Quality Construction. Is that correct? Or is it European Quality Electric? And if it's European Quality Electric, I don't believe that the California state license shows that he has workman's compensation insurance to perform the work with employees. So I was looking for clarification on that, if I could, please.
Do we want to go into this?
Well, I think he actually mentioned that that his company is acquiring European Electric. And so he is the owner of a new business acquiring European Electric. That's what I thought I heard.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And, you know, to add to my comment earlier about European Quality Electric, they're the listed contractor on the contractor's bid document. So the bid document lists all the subcontractors performing the work, and it lists European Quality Electric. Okay, it doesn't list European Quality Construction. And I believe the gentleman mentioned that it's European Quality Construction is his company.
Thank you.
And his list of subcontractors is not European Quality Electric. Is
Thank
that
you.
correct?
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I think he also mentioned that he was going to list employees for European Quality. And he also mentioned that there would be other contractors that he would sub the work out to. And I was just looking for clarification on that, if I could.
Hal, is this relevant?
You know, I really don't think so. First of all, I don't recall him saying he's going to subcontract out, but aside from all of that, as I indicated in my memo to the council, there has been no request from the general contractor to disqualify the sub. I have not found any authority that the city on its own initiative can get into an inquiry concerning the responsiveness of the sub. So, it seems to me you've asked the question as to whether the electrical contractor will have workers' comp, as to whether they will be paying prevailing wages. You can certainly ask the general of any questions in terms of their oversight of these matters, which I think has been asked and answered. But this process is really not intended as an inquiry into the business practices of the subcontractors.
The general is responsible for all of that to the
The general is responsible. I'm sure we're going to be, overlooking the work of the subs, all of them, not just the electrical, but all the subs, very carefully through our own independent inspectors. But the bottom line is that the general is responsible for the entire project, and any defective work, whether it's electrical, plumbing, drywall, or anything else, is the responsibility of the general contractor.
Thank you, Hal. Are there any other council questions? Mr. Mayor. You are?
Good evening. I'm Gary Saunders. I'm the business manager for the Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 467. And
are you going to add to something that you didn't say last week?
Yes.
Please confine your remarks to that.
I would ask the city attorney if it is not proper for the city to consider past performance of a contractor on previous jobs. And I mentioned last week that Black Sea Corporation had, in fact, turned in certified payrolls where they listed 9 apprentices, only one of which was a registered apprentice with the DAS, and they had, in fact, as I presented to the city attorney, turned in certified payrolls showing that they deducted taxes, Social Security, fringe benefits from the certified payroll report of a particular employee, but yet turned none of that in and gave him a 1099. And I was wondering if the city would ask the plumbing contractor, Black Sea Corporation, why he did that. And it is proper to see what the contractor has done in previous jobs to decide whether they are responsive on future jobs.
Thank you for your allegations. Is there any council discussion or further council questions? You are?
My name's William Knack. I'm here representing the Building Trades Council. I'd like to...
And please limit yourself to something you did not say last week.
Absolutely. I'd like to enter this document that was sent to me from Weinberg, Roger, and Rosenfeld in reference to the city's discretion to determine bidder responsibility. I'd like to enter that into as part of our public hearing or discussion on this point this evening.
Thank you.
Last week, a statement was made concerning the possible use of independent contractors on this project and the issue of certified electricians, and this document speaks to both of those subjects. Also, the document makes a statement, and we agree, that the City of Brisbane has the duty to assure that applicable labor laws are not undermined by its contractors. And simply stated, Brisbane cannot give that duty away to the Department of Industrial Relations. And I would like to ask that you look at that part of the letter also. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further council questions?
I do from probably Gary Saunders or from Bill Knack. Can one of you go up there, please? To the mayor.
You ask your own questions.
Yes, I am. Based on what you heard, the questions that Clark asked, and the responses that they gave, are you satisfied with what you heard?
No.
You're not?
No.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Time for council action.
Well, one of the things that Michael had brought up towards the end of the meeting last week is how do we avoid getting in this pickle again? you know, how we do contracts and bids for large projects, large public projects, and I believe staff has discussed somewhat with the trade unions as to ideas. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's true. I did meet with them.
Yeah, and I'd like us to in the future, you know, I think it probably kind of late on this project, you know, but in the future adopt some kind of standards where we're not going through this process the way we are. You know, and I think that was probably your point, Mike, last week. Given that, I think that the subs, you know, I'm not really sure all of it's gone on, but I think that, you know, as a city, that we're going to do what we can to keep a watchful eye, you know, and ask that the trade unions be involved in that. I think it's important, you know, I hope from the testimony you gave tonight, you know, I consider you honorable men, that you're being truthful with what you're saying, and trade unions, you know, they keep a close watch on things too. So I mean, if something's out of kilter, I think you as a city need to take the appropriate action and not hesitate with that. So that's not a motion either. So before you ask,
then keep talking.
No.
But I also like, Clark, I'd like to even take it a little bit further and encourage the parties. Whose phone is that? Sorry.
To turn their cell phones off?
Yes, I'm going to encourage cell phones off.
Thank you. To encourage the parties to get together, talk, because we are in this county. All of us are in this county. I know, again, the union representatives, that they are definitely trying to protect the labor, the welfare of the residents in this county. So I really like to see that happens. I think probably tonight before you leave, maybe you need to make some arrangements to get together and work things out, because, you know, if this goes before another city, it's just not fair. Thank you, sir.
Are there any other comments?
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to move to approve the contract.
I do have a question.
So I ask a question.
My question is, what does the RFP need to include so we're not in this pickle again? This has been a highly emotional issue. It should not have been an emotional issue. It should have been cut and dry and clear.
Si,
yes, sir.
In the interest of moving this forward, can we make that a pending question which staff can address some other night? So that we're not there the next time?
I think, yeah, I think that one's going to take a while to answer, and I'd already asked staff to.
Mr. Mayor, a 5-second answer?
Please.
I have in fact met with the San Mateo County Electrical Construction Industry. They proposed language. We'll be happy to consider and bring it back to you at a later date for your thoughtful consideration.
Well, give me a longer answer next time.
I'll have to speak much slower, sir.
That answer your question?
I'm concerned. I'm concerned when we have subs come in. Well, in the first place, nobody showed when we have a $5 million con. That is, okay, it's your job. I have concern when subs come before us with their attorneys. What is going on here?
At the risk, if I were appearing here after last week's brouhaha, I'd have my attorney with me, just to make sure it all goes straight. Okay, I've heard a motion. Is there a second? I will second the motion. Is there discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Please.
You know, many years ago, when I was getting married, inside I knew there's something wrong. I knew I
Excuse
should
me,
not.
Seppi, is there relevant discussion?
Yes.
Woman's intuition, huh?
Yes. My intuition is I'm still not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
I am not. So I just wanted to share that the marriage didn't last. My intuition was right. So with that, maybe you want to ask.
Is there further discussion? Okay. On the question, do we approve the proposed contract with Savala Construction in the amount of $5,810,000? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
We have a 3-2 vote. The contract is approved. Thank you all very much. Please be quiet if you're leaving now. The next item is to consider approval of lease of 140 Valley Drive as a temporary location of City Hall during the remodel contract.
I had a question on that one.
Sir, we need a place to go. This is it. It's pursuant with the letter of intent that we previously signed, and staff is asking you to give the city manager authority to sign this agreement.
So you have a question?
Yes, sir, I have, and this question is on page 6 of this report. And on the bottom of page 6, item 15 says entry by landlord. And it says the landlord reserves the right to enter the premises at any time to inspect the premises to provide service. Could we put some better language than at any time? I don't know if I want to give a man a key to come into City Hall at any time.
Let me just say that this provision is kind of standard lease language. The one change we did make was to restrict the areas of access. So any portions of the relocated temporary City Hall that are secured are not available for access to the landlord. So for example, other than our normal files and vaults and such, we would typically lock up the HR office and things of that nature that are secured areas within our space are not available to the landlord. But other than that, this is fairly standard lease language. That's all I can say.
I suppose that's right. I suppose that's fine, but you know how it is in City Hall. Inadvertently, some confidential information could be left out by accident or for whatever reason.
Well, we could say at any time during normal business hours, except in the case of emergency. I think that's certainly the intent of this language.
That I can take during normal business hours when there are people there to regulate. That I can accept, sir.
Sir, if I may, and I'm not sure if the city's attorney is aware of this, but the moving company is coming this Friday. And so I guess if Hal has a high confidence that any language that the council would ask be changed tonight, he can work out with Lincoln Properties attorney between now and Friday morning at 8 o'clock. That'd be great. Otherwise, I'm not sure what we're going to be doing come Friday.
Si, would you be willing to leave this question to the discretion of the city attorney and the moving schedule?
I would be, yes. As long as they say it's during normal working hours, I don't have a problem.
Let me just say that so far we've had absolutely no difficulty in negotiating modifications to the lease with the landlord's attorney, so I expect they'll go along with that change.
Thank you, sir. And then on page 11, this is an item called 21.13, and it's toxics. Tenant and landlord agree to hold the other harmless from any responsibility of any toxics which are brought onto the premises on the project by themselves, their agents, employees, contractors, etc., etc. What is that all about?
I'll take a shot and then I'll let the city attorney follow me. Answer. Typically, I would suspect that this is primarily driven based on things such as asbestos. So there's a question many years ago, asbestos was used as a filler and as a binder in just about every material known to mankind. It was often in flooring tiles. It was often used in insulation areas. It was, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what my name is. It was used in overhead suspended T-bar ceilings, all of those sorts of things. I believe that what both of the parties are trying to do here is indemnify each other from saying, hey, look, if we brought it in, you're not going to sue us for it, and if you bring it in, we're not going to sue you for it. It's presumed that it would be unintentional.
Is this standard of any agreement of this type?
It's my understanding this is a fairly standard commercial contract, sir.
It is, except normally it goes one way only, with the tenant having the liability and the landlord not. This is more of a mutual thing where each party indemnifies the other, so I'd have to say it's probably more even-handed than most leases I've seen.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I give you the motion to approve the lease agreement with Lincoln Properties.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, I had a question, though.
Oh.
Maybe you
Clark?
answered it already.
Clark, ask a question.
On the spreadsheet, I guess it would be page 3 of 3, Randy?
Yes, sir.
On there we have, with Waters, we're negotiating for the interim storage.
Yes, sir.
And Interstate is pending, and R&R is T&M, and Flowers is T&M, and
sir.
McClure is T&M.
Sir.
And we don't have a figure for those,
That's correct.
so we don't know what that's going to be, right?
That's correct.
So approving this lease,
Has nothing to do with that, sir. This was just intended to give you an update on what's going on with the project.
okay, and so those costs are going to come back to us later?
No, sir. Those costs are going to be the cost. I mean, there are certain tenant improvement type projects that needed to be done, and so that's what we're doing. We had given the council an estimate. What did I say in there?
Oh, I see.
Back in
They're
June, we had given you an
gonna
estimate. So this is just sort of an ongoing update. I was real proud when I came to you last time, and I was down about $1 million, and now I'm up about $40,000 from where I was on the relocation estimate. So I'm trying to be honest.
Yeah.
As I develop costs and as they come along, I'm trying to give you kind of a running total on where we were. And since you're focused on this, there were two things in there. We had originally estimated the relocation was going to total $85,000. And now we're up at 120, and the two big things that we really didn't know were going to happen in there is, number one, I hadn't considered in my estimate that we were going to have to put a new pedestrian crosswalk in to get those of our citizens who routinely walk down to City Hall safely across Valley Drive, and that was a $25,000 drop. Yeah. And at the time when I originally worked up the estimate, I hadn't considered that it was going to take a consulting service to do this, and that was a $25,000 drop. And quite frankly, it's been absolutely necessary. The amount of time that's been involved for one person to go out and measure each and every desk and figure out which office it's going to fit into and where the credenza fits and how to lay that out and how to fully develop the request for quotations to Waters has been time that frankly I nor no one on my staff would have had. It's been a full-time job for a number of weeks for one person. So those are the two things that really bumped us off that $85,000.
Okay. All right, and a lot of those are, like you said, reimbursed anyway, right?
Sir, the ones that are reimbursed are not on here. The two items that are pursuant to our lease that are reimbursed are the painting of the interior walls, which was finished Sunday, and the installation of the carpets, which starts tomorrow and finishes on Thursday. And those items are both automatic deducts from the lease. So for the first at least 3 months, we'll be sending the landlord a letter saying we would have owed you money, but we paid these costs up front, so we're debiting it off.
Oh, okay. I get it, all right, I got it. These others are because they're things that are stimulated from inside the organization and not...
Yes, sir. Things that were very specific to us, like a great example would be the electrical. We've got two of the large copiers we have in our main copying room are 220-volt copiers. They didn't have 220-volt service anywhere in the building nor in the rooms where we were proposing to put these, so it's on us to come in and make that very specific tenant improvement. But as far as just putting paint on the wall and putting new carpet on the floor so it's habitable, the landlord agreed that was their responsibility, but they just didn't want to put the cash into it up front.
Right. I got it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, we had a motion and a second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. We move to item C. Water and rate proposition section 218 hearing. Who gets the ball on this one?
Stuart. The money store.
The
money store.
A notification was mailed out to all property owners as well as all people who receive a water bill from the city of Brisbane. That was a change from last year. Last year we mailed it out to all property owners per our understanding of 218. Since that time, the issue of water rates and 218 has evolved. So we made a mailing to both property owners and to ratepayers. What we had said was that we were looking at increasing water rate by 6%. This is based off of the anticipated increase from the water purveyor plus inflation, and then for sewer service we were looking at just an inflationary increase of 1%, or not of inflation, but the anticipated increase from SF Puck. For inflation for both of these, we were able to absorb the cost of inflation within the budgets, as I had talked about at the time for the budget. We have not increased the rates for those people who are currently under the CARE program. That's the same direction that the City Council gave us last year, and we are continuing to follow that direction. The city did receive a letter requesting that the same idea of not raising rates be applied to all senior citizens. If this is the City Council desire, or the City Council wishes to review this, our recommendation is to have this go to a subcommittee of the City Council. There are a number of issues that are involved, one of which is what would actually be considered a qualifying senior. Would it be somebody who is eligible for ARP? Is it somebody who is 65 years old? Is it somebody who is on Social Security? There's a whole breadth of just trying to define what a senior citizen is that would be eligible for it. Also, the other question is, how does that impact the water rates for people who are non-senior citizens? Would need to be reviewed. And I think that would be best handled by a council subcommittee, so we can fully explore that issue.
What is ARC?
ARP?
ARP, yeah.
American Association of Retired People, which is, you qualify for that at 50.
Yeah.
So the question of, truly trying to define for the purposes of Brisbane what a senior citizen is may be a longer process than...
They sent me a card when I turned 50, I remember now.
Yes.
You're having a senior moment, huh?
And there's no action needed to take. This is part of an existing ordinance that this would go into effect with the next bill.
Yeah, I like the idea of sending it to the subcommittee. We still have to meet, I think, with some of our other issues that we're going to meet this year in regards to looking at the water and sewer rates. So we're still addressing that, and this would probably be a time to do it. In addition to that, just to look at for the seniors. That's the council's desire.
I have a concern about about making policy based on somebody's age. Personally, if you consume something, and you can afford it, I think that it's every expectation I have to pay for what I consume, and I'm concerned about setting a precedent, saying that just because you reached some age, you no longer need to pay your way. If you have a financial or economic issue and you can't afford it, I wholeheartedly support that, and I have in years past with these rate increases, but I really think that's the crux of the issue. So that's just my opinion before we refer to a subcommittee.
And I would echo that remark. My note was that our costs are the same regardless of our age. And that if you want to add a level of complexity, you can talk about ability to pay. But I don't think because I'm 66 or 64, that fact alone, I should be paying different rates for the water I use. Who is the subcommittee that will get this?
Right here in the end.
Ah, good.
Your left wing.
We'll leave it to the left-wingers then. So, Stuart, no action is needed, correct?
Right. This will go into effect with the next water and sewer bill we send out.
Are we content taking no action?
I am. It's going to go to the subcommittee.
Well, there isn't really any action to take on it unless we wanted to change the methodology, right?
No one
Correct.
can-
And that's being suggested to go to the subcommittee
I hear,
first.
I hear no suggestions for action tonight, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stuart.
In other words, we're not going to raise the rates tonight.
No, the rates,
I want to be sure.
you're making a yoke, huh?
Yeah,
Yes,
stretching me.
I think so far, I think what we need to do is, really, Mr. Mayor, as a subcommittee, we really need to get together, and I'm not blaming anyone on this, but we just, ever since we were formed, we really don't have any more information than when we started. And I think it's time we started getting information that we require.
Just to be clear, the rates are going to go into effect with the next bill,
Why is that?
without our taking any action tonight.
Why is that?
That's what's been proposed.
No, it does by ordinance back in 2001 that was adopted.
That's the way the ordinance works. Perhaps, Clay, you want to explain this again?
Yeah, this was a factor in the hearings that we had at that particular point in time when we were looking at a number of issues, including the capital cost of the system, getting the operating expenses, the operating revenues up to meet operating expenses. And one of the issues that we came up against was that we get pass-through costs from City and County of San Francisco, who does sewage treatment for us and is our water supplier. And those are just costs to our system that happen annually. And the council's decision at that time was to go through the ordinance and to automatically pass those on. And so we do that every year, and then this hearing you have tonight is a requirement of a court case that happened a couple years ago where it was the state decided that the state Supreme Court decided that that this fell under the 218 regulations and that there had to be actually a hearing. So that's essentially where you're at. You have the hearing, you have any input from the public, and then absent a direction to staff not to implement the ordinance, basically, that you have on the books, we go ahead and implement the ordinance.
With that, last year, for people that fell under the program of PG&E.
Correct.
Program.
That was the low income.
Right, and this year, we're going to do the same thing, right?
Yes.
We're not passing through.
Yeah, that program's in effect, and anybody who meets the criteria for that would get the discount.
And currently, that's approximately 20, 25 households.
25 households, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What happened to the most favorite rates that we were getting because of GVMID?
We still get those.
Still blended in.
That's blended in. We get a certain amount for GBME and also a certain amount for the city of Brisbane.
But remember, that doesn't apply to all water, just to that was covered under that old
Agreement, yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
15 cents a unit for perpetuity.
Should have increased the units.
Yeah, I'm gonna, for the record, I'm gonna oppose this raise of water rates until this, we were thinking, that the committee tried to get the rates, to lower the rates, and that was part of our direction of purpose. And we haven't had meetings, and the rates keep climbing. So I'm gonna just for the record, I know this is not a vote, I'm gonna personally oppose this, and I want this to go on the record that I am opposed to this raise.
Okay, the record will reflect that.
Thank you, sir.
When, just as, I guess since Cy and I are the, Cy and I, not sure I like that. Me and Cy. No.
That's okay.
Or the subcommittee. What's our plan for the next subcommittee meeting? Because there was some information that was supposed to be presented, and I think that's probably where Cy's going.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to have a subcommittee meeting in the next few weeks. I think when you and I had talked, Clark, we said the end of September or first part of October, somewhere in that period of time. And we're going to follow up on the items that we talked about before in terms of the system management as well as the rate structure.
Right.
And those are, I think, the two major issues. And both of them are, as we know, are very involved sorts of issues with a lot of different options and tentacles. So it's going to take us, I think, quite a while to work through that. But that was that's what the work plan was going to be.
Yeah, I agree with Cy. I mean, I certainly don't want to keep, raising rates and then not, I mean, it may ultimately we come to the end of the process and say, well, they ain't going to get no better. But we have to go through the process in order to find that out. And I think that's your point. But,
yes, sir.
But by the same token, I think we don't want to get to the point of where we were years ago, not doing anything, and then the point where we can't do anything and then really have to raise it. So, okay. Thank you.
All right, Mayor, Council matters. Are there any subcommittee reports? No, it's not a public hearing. However, would you like to comment?
Right.
Yeah.
It comes after the subcommittee report.
No, she's talking about the water rates.
Is this a public hearing?
Technically it is, so
Well,
anyone
then
can speak. on the
technically,
issue.
we're going to open the public hearing and hear from Anya Miller.
Well, I have to. Anya Miller, 224 Sierra Point Road. To make the increase, the unavoidable increase, more palatable, I think the city should be more aggressively helping people conserve water. And there are several ways that you could do that, and I hope that you can direct your staff to make some efforts. There's a family festival coming up on October 6th. That would be a good opportunity to really give people good points on how to save water. And one of my favorites is always the bucket in the shower, where you you use the soapy water for your toilet, and or watering your garden or something. But it's such a simple thing that you can do every day, and a toilet is the biggest water user. So some sort of arrangement, with advertising, with plumbers to provide the low-flow toilets, stuff like that. Numerous little things that people can do to lower their own bill and help the world. So that's my input. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak? And we'll close the public hearing.
So moved. Motion to close public hearing.
For a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Could Fred? Didn't mean to wake you up. Just kidding. Just kidding, Fred. No. I think a number of years ago, this is in response to Anya Miller. A number of years ago, we had looked at or done an article on low flush toilets and low flow shower heads and things like that. Do you recall that at all?
Yes, sir. The Open Space Ecology Committee had developed kind of a water conservation or recommended set of water conservation programs. One of those was some articles that were ran in the Brisbane Star that addressed the issues that Anya was talking about, hints on how to save water. Another component was an ordinance that was brought to council and adopted that prohibited certain types of wasteful activities, like letting water run down the gutter and that sort of thing. So, and then the third component was a component where the was a proposal to provide some sort of rebate to citizens who purchased a low-flow toilet, and the City Council rejected that part of the program. So that was not approved. But the public education program and the water waste ordinance were both implemented.
Yeah, could we reprint that again in our next newsletters and stuff like that?
Of course, yeah.
Pull that back up.
And we can have those materials and turn that into a handout that can be distributed at the community festival that's coming up in October.
That'd be great if the council's amenable to that.
I am, but I would like to point out that
Yeah, I know it's
you know what's coming. Because of our successful conservation efforts in the past, we've had to raise rates even further because we're not covering our fixed costs. So it's a honorable and commendable thing to do, but I just don't want the message received to be that by conserving, you're going to lower your bill necessarily. If everybody conserves too much, we're going to have to raise rates to cover our fixed costs of the system. That's all. But please, by all means, conserve. I have suggested gray water systems in the general plan update. I'm all in favor of gray water systems. I just wanted everybody to have a realistic understanding of the impacts.
Just a quick one.
Please.
Fred Bosca is working on just those toilets now, I think, so you might check with Randy, see how far they've gotten with.
Okay, I'll do that.
Zero flush.
Now to move this along, we now come to mayor council matters. Are there any subcommittee reports?
No, we had one. It was premature, but we.
Well, okay. We come now to oral communications number 2, and I understand Anya Miller has another matter for us.
Has to do with health and safety and the swimming pool. There is quite an emergency there. The hours this week are absolutely cut down to the minimum of 4 hours in the evening. And all those people who use the pool for their health and safety, all ages, are now severely inconvenienced, and that's because of lack of staff. And I understand under the new management, whatever it is, it's not as good as we had before, that's for sure. We really miss Neil. I understand there have been applicants for these positions of lifeguard, but they have not been able to be hired because they lack CPR training. And they can't get CPR training until there's 8 of them in a group that can get a class. And to me, that makes no sense at all, that we should somehow, the council should, and somebody should facilitate even one applicant if all they miss is CPR training, to get that training and get hired, because we need those lifeguards at the pool so that the people can swim. And I'm one of them, so I really hope that there's some action soon.
Will staff look into that and see?
Well, we're working daily on this issue, trying to get staffing there, and I think Anya spoke to the core problem when we had the pool supervisor left in July, and with the school, a lot of the lifeguards are young people, and the lifeguards went back to school, and whether that be high school or college, and so we've just have had a real staffing shortage. I'll get you an update tomorrow on where we're at. I do believe that right now we're still hoping to have somebody on board as far as the new pool supervisor sometime in the month of October. That will help significantly, but we are also looking for additional lifeguards especially to work the early morning hours. The weekends, kids are available to work, so that hasn't been as much of a problem, but particularly the morning hours have been difficult.
But let's make sure that if we have a candidate or 3 candidates who are just fine, but they haven't had their CPR training, let's bring the CPR training in and get it done.
Yeah, I'll get you a report back on that.
Thank you very much.
Our
Fire department can
firefighters
train.
are certified to do CPR training, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we actually have been working with the fire department on this issue.
Okay, so I mean, that thing of 8 people is necessarily required.
I'll get the details.
Okay.
We're ready to close the public meeting. Sepi, you wanted to...
I would like that. Steve Dunsky's father passed away, and if you guys don't mind, I'd like to ask the council to close the meeting in his honor. His name is Ephraim Dunsky.
Agreed.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn to closed session upstairs.